Hey guys, welcome back. So today I've got something a little bit different. Up on the bench is a McCulloch Beaver 2.0 chainsaw. And as you can probably guess, it doesn't run. Now, I don't own this saw. The owner is having issues with it. From what I understand, he's gone into that carb a few times. He's cleaned it, he's partially rebuilt it, he's fully rebuilt it, and it went from not running to running pretty well to then flooding out the crankcase, and now it's not running again. So he dropped it off, wants me to have a look, and that's what I plan on doing. So let me get set up a little bit better. I want to get some fuel in the tank and just quickly validate where we're at and go from there. All right, let's give this a try. We got the choke on, ignition on, and we got fuel. Yeah, and I get nothing from this engine. Feels like the compression's good. I'm going to pull the spark plug. I want to get just a little fuel in the cylinder and see if that makes a difference. Okay, good. That told me a lot. I know I got spark, timing, and compression. Fuel is obviously the issue. So that carb does need to be gone through. Unfortunately, there is no easy way to access that carburetor. The engine actually has to be uninstalled from this case. So I'm going to get the fuel out of the tank that I just put in there and then break this thing down. fuel tank isn't playing nice on this one. There is a quick disconnect right about there, and it's supposed to be locked in. So when you pull the tank out, the tank kind of unplugs from it, but that is not secured where it's supposed to be. So it's kind of tugging the fuel line and not disconnecting like the way that it should. So I'm going to try to get that off if I can. You know, it's probably not the end of the world. I just don't want to break the tank. So I'm going to take my time with this. Okay. This here looks to be a fuel filter where the quick disconnect is, and it does not look to be in very good shape. So I added some fuel back to the tank about to this level. Just wanted to see what kind of a flow we get. And yeah, it's not good. So that alone could be the issue. But I'm going to keep going. I've come this far. We'll get that carb off and see if there's anything else going on. Before I can get this out fully, I do need to disconnect the throttle linkage right there. From what I can tell, this piece of plastic is kind of in a C shape, and this piece of metal, which is running to the carburetor, connected to the throttle, just kind of sits in there. So I think if I hold down the black piece, I should be able to push up on the metal one and get that out. There we go. That wasn't too bad. We now have access to what we need, which is the carb right here. Now, it looks like it shares a bolt, maybe two, with the ignition coil. So most likely the coil has to come off in order to get the carb off. Actually, before I take this apart, I'm going to pressure test it and see where it's at. Yeah, not too bad. It's holding pressure. Doesn't look half bad in here. I mean, this kit is definitely new. Everything's nice and flexible, so I think I can get away with reusing that. Now, the thing that does stand out is this lever here. The metering diaphragm sits above it, and when the fuel level in here gets low, it'll push that open and let some more fuel pass the needle. And you don't want that lever to be higher than this surface. If anything, it should be a touch below. And in this case, that lever is extending beyond where it should. So like that, it is going to hang the needle open and flood the crankcase like the owner was reporting. So that has to be adjusted. And, you know, the fact that it wasn't running, you know, the pump looks fine. I don't think there's any issues there. I think the issue is the fuel filter. So anyway, I'm going to finish reassembling this. Actually, not assembling it, getting it apart, put it in the ultrasonic, then put it back together, sort out that fuel filter, and should be good to go. Yeah, the high speed was only half a turn out, and that may also be an issue. I think a better starting point probably would be at least a turn out. Let's see where the low speed's at. Low speed was a full turnout. Now, sometimes these can be different, so you probably want to keep track of them and make sure they go back where they were. Yeah, and you can see just by looking at it, it is different. Visually very different, so I shouldn't be able to mix those up. And this lever is spring loaded, so I'm keeping my thumb on it. I don't want to lose that spring. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. So we'll get this soaking, just get it spotless, and put it back together. I was just drying this stuff off, getting it ready for reassembly, and thought I'd blow through the fuel inlet, and found it to be quite restrictive. So although the screen looks clear, I don't know if it was replaced, and I don't have another one on hand, but I'm going to pop it out, just try spraying it with some carb cleaner, and we'll try it again. Yeah, that's much better. That's pretty good. We're right there. So I'm going to leave it at that. Hopefully that's good enough. Okay, good. Okay, there's the filter. Yeah, a little bit dirty. I think it is distorted quite a bit. And I took a look at these online, and this, I mean, this is literally how it is. It just goes in, I think, right there, and acts as the filter for the fuel tank. So anyway, I got a new one of those on the way. We'll put that in once it gets here. But for now, I'm going to get the carb back on as well as the coil. And then I'm going to loosely assemble the saw. I want to test it out before committing and fully assembling it. things are together just enough for a test. You know, I've got the throttle connected, the on-off switch, the recoil, and I've connected the fuel as well. So I put a bit of fuel in this cup. We've got a weighted filter here, and I did pull it over about 3 times just to make sure the pump was working, and primed right away. The fuel advanced to right about there. So another 2 or 3 pulls, and it should make it to the carb. Now, the carb, the jetting's going to be off. I might adjust it a bit now, but I'll save the main adjustment for outside. You know, I just want to make sure that the carb is functioning the way that it should before putting everything back together. Nice. Sounds rich. So I'm going to dial the low speed jet back a little bit. I didn't expect it to run that well. It took me a second to realize the idle was set too low. So I brought that up. And then once it was up, I adjusted the low speed jet. I found the point where the engine was racing the fastest and then opened it up a bit more to settle things down. And haven't touched the high speed jet. But the way it's running now, it's pretty close, I think, to the right spot. As far as the engine speed goes, I think this one should be between 1900 and 2000 RPM at idle. So I'll have to adjust that down a touch more, but we're pretty close. Unfortunately, on the high speed side, my tachometer cannot read over 10,000 RPM, so might need to get a new one of those, but I have the information I need. The carburetor is fine. The engine is running well. So I'm going to place an order, get a new fuel filter, probably a new air filter, and I guess while waiting for that stuff, I'll just put this together as far as I can until I get those parts. It's been a few days, and the new filters are here on the left, so they're ready to get installed. As far as the saw goes, I actually haven't done anything to it since the last time you saw it, except I removed this weighted filter and connected it to the tank. I wanted to check two things. I guess first, I wanted to make sure the O-ring was good on this quick disconnect, and it seems to be fine. The other issue was the reported flooding of the crankcase. So I filled this tank up nearly to the top. I actually brought it right to this line right here, and it's still at that level. So as far as I can tell, it's not flooding into the engine, but I'm going to just try starting it right now and make sure that the crankcase is not flooded. I'd call that a pass. So I'm going to pause it here, just get the fuel out of the tank, slide the engine back out, and then I'll turn you back on for the final reassembly. I'm going to start actually with the tank and just getting the new filter in. Now, I did cheat a little. I went online and just wanted to research this filter a bit because I haven't seen one like it before. And I had two questions, really. I guess first is, why is this a circular hole and this is a rectangular filter? And couldn't really find an answer for that. But when installing it, I think the important thing is that this circular piece only goes down to right about there. So you don't want to push the wick all the way in. It'll fall into the tank. But you do want to get it in just far enough so that you can get that quick disconnect installed without too much interference. And the other thing I learned is that, this is a wick. Fuel is not going to flow out of it. So the fact that it was just dripping out of the old one may have actually been okay. I'll test that once the new one's installed to see if there's any change in flow. But my best guess is that since this is a wick and there's no weighted filter, when you turn the saw sideways, the wick has some fuel in it to keep the saw running, at least for a short time. At least that's the best I can come up with. So let's see if we can get this installed without ripping it. That should be good. It's definitely better. I wouldn't call it great, but I think that is how it's supposed to be. I'm just going to replace the fuel line. The one that was on there wasn't bad, but since we're here, might as well put a new one on. All right, not too bad. The fuel quick disconnect is in a good position, so I'm going to try to push it down. I need to snap it in down here, so that way when I plug the tank in later, it doesn't move. There we go. Like that. Okay, let's see if we can get the throttle linkage in. I think that's it. Beautiful. Besides the quick disconnect, the tank also has a fitting for the oiler. So I'm going to put that in place right here. This side actually does nothing, but there is a casting to kind of hold it in place, but it doesn't actually serve a purpose. This here is the important part that goes in the tank. Just twist this around. And now it's locked in place. So when installing the tank, you got to keep that in mind. You want to line this up and line that up down there. And I might have to hold it up a little bit so it's not quite on the bottom so that everything lines up. And there we go. Make sure that this piece is installed. It's actually pretty important. The air filter does not install and make a good seal on the carburetor. It actually sits on the body of the saw. So without this piece, any dust that gets blown into the case will end up kind of shooting out around here and into the engine. So that prevents that from happening and makes a good seal. And this doesn't fit. Yeah, they're different. Just a bit. But can't use the new one, so we'll have to use the old one for now. Circle back on that later. Another thing worth noting, when I was testing the function of the pump in the carburetor, I noticed it would not prime unless the choke was on. So just something to keep in mind. This does not have a purge bulb, so if you need to prime the system, you have to have the choke on. I think adding that air filter richened things up too much, so that low speed jet has to be brought in a bit. We're getting pretty close. The low speed adjustment, it's a very fine point between letting too much fuel in, which will eventually stall the saw, or not letting enough fuel in and it runs lean. So I think I'm at that sweet spot right now. You know, the idle, I was trying to bring it down more, but it is bottomed out. And it's kind of weird actually, because once you bottom out, if you keep going, it starts bringing the speed back up. So I left it at the lowest point possible, and I think that'll be okay because the clutch is not engaging. In the high speed side, I did richen it up just a touch. So I'm going to let this sit for about 10 or 15 minutes and try restarting it. It's been just over 10 minutes. Let's see if it'll start. Try it with the choke off. Okay, choke. Well, guys, I think that's a wrap. I mean, this saw is doing a very good job. And for its age, I mean, this was probably made in the late 80s. It's running very well and is one of the cleaner saws I've ever worked on. So I kind of hated making all these wood chips messing up the saw. So I will clean it up a bit before sending it back to the owner. But I think we're there. So I'm going to cycle this a few more times over the next couple days, just to make sure there's no surprises. But for the purposes of this video, I think I'm done. So I hope this video helps someone. Thanks for watching.